talking point, and a lot of it was stuff I'd like to share. But really, I think mostly I'd like to hear if any of you have any particular questions, what you might like to hear. So I guess at this time, which is kind of early to ask for questions, but I'll just go ahead and throw it out there. At this point, is there any questions regarding producing and distributing local farming inputs in Hawaii and or particular biochar?
What is your present production capacity?
Ulu! Damn it!
Hopefully not.
Go chicken go! Go chicken go!
Go Kyle, go! That's a first. So, then moving on. Present production capacity.
Yeah, because I know you had stuff that you were doing like in California, and then you're also doing it here. So I was just curious what like how much you can make.
That's the dog.
That's the dog, not the chicken. Yeah, the dog's getting a little lesson.
Lickings.
Yeah, getting some lickings. It's true. There you go. So, present production capacity. I'll do this in a couple of ways. I'll put it in a couple things that might give a perspective. We produce 18 cubic yards a week of biochar. On average, 15 to 18 cubic yards a week of biochar. 15 to 18 cubic yards a week is about 5 times my initial production capacity. Easily 5, maybe 10 times my early days production capacity. But 15 to 20 cubic yards is enough to properly treat about 50 acres a year. That's it. We've got a lot of acres.
And that's a one-time.
Yeah, that'd be like if you at 15 to 20 cubic yards per acre, you are going to significantly change that soil for the next few generations. You'll significantly change that soil for the next few generations. So that's pretty cool. I mean, in every single week, the production capacity we have now will significantly change an acre of land for the next few generations. That's kind of cool. But then if you look at the scope of what's needed in Hawaii, and you look at it per capita or compared to the scope of how much land we're using, it's pathetically small. But all in due time, we're growing. It's step by step. But what I really like is there was a strange arc. When I first started as a local producer, it was a backyard operation. And I was doing it with a lot of sweat and passion. And chainsaw blades, and it would it meant that I had to sell a product at a pretty high dollar, and I was also limited in how much I could do. So it was like a boutique thing. I was like a boutique brewmaster or something. Would be a good analogy. And that was great. I mean, I did that for years, and then. We just were really hitting walls because at that production capacity, we really couldn't service much other than a little interest. We could plant the seeds, but it really wasn't enough to make much of a dent. And because we're only of a certain size, it was difficult to get beyond one of the toughest things there is, which is critical mass. When it comes to insurance regulation and running a legitimate business. To run a legitimate business, it takes a certain inertia. That inertia typically means a lot of paperwork and capital. There's a certain amount of paperwork and capital it takes to have and operate a legitimate business, and it's not easy.
And production.
And production. And that's, I think, one of the big caps, and I think that's part of like this giant turmoil that we see in the political process right now, because you have this big struggle You have Bernie Sanders on one side saying, look, the system is so broken, it doesn't work for the people anymore. And you have other people saying, it's working just fine. Yeah, we might want to tweak this and that, but things are just fine. Well, I would kind of have to agree with Bernie more and say, like, it's so broken, it's hard for people like me to start a business and actually get the inertia to run a legitimate business. Just because of it's really, really, really tough. And I think for anything that you're trying to do local, that's usually the thing you're going to come up with. Is it's easy when you're small enough to fly under the radar, but when you can no longer fly under the radar and you have to become legitimate, it takes a lot of inertia, and that's usually cash and paperwork. And that's one of the tough ones. So I spent a few years basically flying under the radar. But, I was coming up with things where I was having great interest. I have the university like, wow, this is amazing what you're doing. We want to do more research, blah, 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 blah. Oh, you mean you're making this in your backyard? Yeah, we can. So where's your permits? Oh, wow, so what you're doing has the potential to save the planet. It's carbon sequestration, it's local farming inputs. We want to help support you. Where's your permits for burning? Oh, how do you produce this stuff? Oh, wait. So you mean you're bringing things from off-site onto your site, manufacturing and selling? Oh, well, that's illegal. You can't do that. Literally, the stuff I ran into was just absolutely ridiculous. But I just flew under the radar and took the risks and did it anyways. And that worked fine. And then we kind of got into that middle ground. I worked with a larger company. So for years I had no capital and no technology. I was doing this out of pocket with very rudimentary technology. I was making BioChar and basically an emu that was a very modified fire, and no capital. It was all just labor and the technology I developed myself was a shovel. And there was technology involved with how you do it, but it's really simple. And then this company came along, this company from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and they had capital and technology. And they wanted to partner with my company because they wanted to install a machine on Kauai, and they needed somebody with the local know-how. And I'm the BioChar guy when it comes to Hawaii. And so they had threw out a bunch of different things, and basically they bought my company. Because they wanted distribution, and I had already created a company with distribution, so they bought my company. They actually only bought the branding. They weren't very good at their paperwork. So they only bought the branding of my company, but then they bought the branding of my company and hired me to be the operations manager for the facility that was being installed on Kauai. So we installed this big machine on Kauai. It was this $250,000 expenditure. That ran over budget beyond that. And you know what? It was supposed to be a turnkey unit. It was not. It was anything but. It was a beta model at best, like just barely one step above a prototype. We completely redesigned that whole thing, which is not easy. Again, in Hawaii, finding parts can take 3 weeks. It's ridiculous. But anyways, we got that thing going. We were up and running, and we were part of a vertically integrated system. It was one of those things where you're like, wow, okay, so here's this beautiful thing here where there's a plantation growing rainbow eucalyptus. And to make the rainbow eucalyptus grow faster and without fertilizer is rainbow eucalyptus mixed with albizia. Straight line rows, intentionally planted albizia with rainbow eucalyptus. From a study done on this island, where they found that when the two were grown together, the nitrogen-fixing albizia helped create more fertile ground for the very competitive eucalyptus to shoot up straighter, taller, and fatter. And they actually got greater yield on a single acre when there was only half as many trees because they intermixed with the leguminous species albizia. So they did that on Kauai, and there was 1,800 acres of straight-line planted eucalyptus and albizia. And it was 12 years ago. It was 12 years since it had been planted. So they needed a lot of thinning to do. So they're going to take the albizia thinning and use it to create biochar. The grass underneath this canopy was incredibly fertile from all the excessive nitrogen. So they're going to use the grass to make cattle cubes to support the local cattle industry because the subsidies to bring in cattle cubes, to bring in cattle feed got cut off, and that's why all the dairies left. Because the subsidies to bring in feed left, and we didn't have any local inputs. We became so reliant upon people from the outside supplying us with cattle feed that when they cut off the subsidies, an entire industry almost died overnight. So here was this grass cubing operation, which is, I thought, just so brilliant, and they're going to make local cattle feed, and they're going to use the thinnings to create the heat to dry the grass, make the cubes. I thought, so stoked. Well, they never got the grass cubing machine going because they tried to build it themselves, and doing anything in Hawaii takes a lot more work than you might imagine because getting parts is not easy, and labor is hard to come by sometimes. And so that part of the project never got going, so they no longer were incentivized to provide us with Albizia chips, and they no longer needed the heat, so here we are with this BioChar thing, and we have to go out and buy all of our feedstock, and that just didn't work anymore. We had no one that wanted the heat, so that didn't work anymore. So there's a machine on Kauai that makes BioChar, and it's sitting there mothballed right now. So that is that second stage right there. So like, the first stage of my business, when I was just a little boutique, making it all by hand, it's all labor, but low risk. That thing was $250,000. Ouch. Luckily, it wasn't out of my pocket. I was just the director I just made the thing work, so I'm out there conscious. But that was $250,000 ouch because it was part of a big system that didn't quite get off the ground. And I think that's a pretty classic story that we see, and one of the really tough things is in a local economy, how do you make it to the size where you're legitimate safely? Like John's done great with that. John Caverly, the farm that you've done, it only took you 30 years. But for 30 years, you've been doing a great job, and now you've got this awesome thing with the Sweet Kang Cafe that's just humming right along, fully legitimate, in your brand new, beautiful kitchen. It's just really cool to see. So parallel with that, now 7 years after beginning my little boutique biochar operation, I guess this middle zone is an interesting story as well. So after that machine on Kauai was mothballed, what am I going to do to supply all the people in Hawaii who want biochar? Do I go back to the pits and start making it in my backyard again? Well, at that time, we had discovered a source of biochar on the mainland that was just really, really cheap. Incredibly cheaper than anything I could possibly produce out here. So much so that even by the time we've shipped it out here, I can ship it out here for cheaper than I can make it myself. So what do? We shipped it out here by the container load. We did about 3-4 containers.
Of what was it?
Of biochar.
From what?
Just straight. It was from forestry.
Oh, the slash.
Yeah, the forestry slash. So when you take a round log, you make square lumber. There's all the bark and all the leftovers, as well as the branches and the treetops from the forestry thinnings, because they can only leave so much. They can only safely leave so much in the field, otherwise it becomes fuel hazard for fire. So all of that is forestry residues, and that was the source of the biochar. And that was from a larger system on the mainland that was producing heat and energy. So anyways, they were getting the money out of the heat and the energy. The biochar was basically icing on the cake. So they were able to sell it to us really cheap, and we were bringing it by the container loads. But again, that's a tough one because it's, that's not really what I was trying to build a business to do. I was trying to build a business to utilize local resources to create local farming inputs. That's the kind of whole premise. I don't want to start a global, global shipping network. That's not really what I'm looking like. That's what good does that do to the progress of humanity? I think that's part of the big mess we're in right now. And reversing somewhere away from that creates more resilience. And I think there's a lot of reasons why local, I think, is an incredibly important way of being in farming. I would probably say almost local is more important than organic as a precedence. Because if it is local, it's probably going to be organic. Because if you see your neighbor and you know your neighbor and you know what he's spraying, you're not going to buy his stuff. It's more common that when you know people and engage with them, it changes the way that farming happens. And I think that local tends to do that. I guess that's a difficult statement, which would be more important. It's kind of like apples and oranges, if local is more important than organic. But I feel like it's a really important concept and to try and practice. So anyways, fast forward, we shipped in some container loads. I wasn't happy about it, but we did it, and we helped supply the local needs for biochar, and kind of kept the ball rolling and helped set the stage for where we are now. And where we are now is we've stepped up a little bit. And so now I'm working with a local macadamia nut processing facility. So they take their macadamia nut shell and they use it as fuel for heat and energy. They use the energy for processing, and they use the heat for drying and roasting. So the macadamia nut shell becomes a fuel for drying, roasting, and processing. And the biochar is, again, by that time, the biochar is basically icing on the cake, because you've gained so much value out of the fuel, out of the energy from it. So that now it's a legitimate, permitted, everything's legal, and a lot of headache process. But it's been a nice transition. And then the idea from here is that, we've been spending quite a bit of time on proof of concept, and hopefully I'd like to take this to the next step. I've got biochar so cheap on the mainland I can still ship it over here. But that's not really the point. What I'd like to see is whatever happens at Huonua, I'd like to see that they produce biochar rather than ash. If they're going to be burning stuff, I'd like to help try to provide the proof, for lack of a better word, that the biochar is more valuable than the ash, and it's worth its weight in, it's worth its heat value, and then some. And so I mean, it's taken a long time to prove. It's taken a long time to kind of get that. It's like for the process of the business, it's I think particularly been difficult for me because I'm not just dealing with like fertilizer or replacement for something else that the community already uses. It's kind of a new paradigm. So I've had an additional hurdle to get over, which is like education of a new thing. Where sometimes a simple replacement is a lot easier. But I see in Hawaii that there's this strange thing, where we have such a wonderful resource in the climate, and we have soils that have a great potential. A lot of them have been abused, but they can be revitalized. And especially in Hamakua, when these soils are healthy, they're really productive. And we're importing 80% of our food. Like how do we flip that around? How do we start flipping that around? And farming always used to be a local thing. The farming inputs and the produce was both sourced and sold locally. For the most part, I mean, there's definitely shipping that has always been a part of it. Shipping back guano and things and shipping certain produce out, but a lot of it is local. And then when that got disconnected, how do we go about reconnecting that? I feel that's really important. It's something I've been working on for years and finding great value in it. And one of the values that I find is incredibly important is the face value of working with people and knowing them by name and being part of a community, which helps give you I don't know, feeling like you're actually worth something. I don't know. Being a part of a community is a great feeling, and working local, I like that. So any questions, Yuri?
Yeah. So I got some BioChar from you, and it comes pretty much inert, sterile, just uncharged or whatever you want to call it. And I was wondering if you played enough with the inoculation to know kind of the max loading of biology, how long it's going to be in a compost pile, how much do you need of your fertilizer to inoculate with fertility, because biology is with in synchronous fertility, but your biology in your compost isn't necessarily going to have all the phosphorus that you might get with some other fertilizer. So I mixed a couple yards of your stuff the last time we got it, and I used 10 yards of the mushroom shit, the mushroom waste. And so that's 10 and 2, and I used about 4 totes, 1,600 pounds each of the dulse shit.
Oh yeah.
From the, lots of shit, very stinky, solid waste, black sludge, making people gag. And I have made that into an aerobic, black as all anything pile. And I love it and I'm proud of it. But I don't know for how long it should be in there getting hot, or how much of the shit should I be adding to make it full. You know what I'm saying? But you already got it down to the right particle size.
Yeah,
and everything.
It's nice now, huh?
Yeah, it's kitty litter.
It is like kitty litter. No, I've said that. You know, I'm trying to think of better analogies because I'm not sure if kitty litter's like always the best. Oh yeah, I want to put that in my soil now. But it is like it's like.
If you guys haven't seen,
does anyone want to see it? I brought a bucket. I got some bags too if anyone wants. You can take a little baggie home. But this is the BioChar. This is the Mac Nut shell. And you know, and I actually, you know, it's really funny is if you leave it, if you have cats,
He'll poop in it.
you have my cat. I have 3 acres. My cat lives outside. She can go anywhere she wants. Where do you know?
and that's what she.
Yeah, that's the one. She seeks it out.
Inoculating you.
Well, she seeks it out. Like when I go.
They're trying to help you out.
Here's some nitrogen for your
You
carbon.
won't smell it.
Oh. I know. It's like it gets completely like there's no smell. It completely soaks up the odor.
And that's just after burning, like it just falls apart like that, like in that size. You don't have to like grind. Okay.
It's pre-ground.
Got it.
Because it's primarily fuel, and so they grind it down to the right particle size so that they get it's very uniform and consistent burn. A very uniform, consistent burn.
Oh, got it.
You know, there's a lot of metal and machinery and computers and bells and whistles and things that yell at you if you don't do things right. And so, you know, everything's pre-ground before it goes through.
Well, I know you were doing that for years with the fishbone meal.
Yeah. So
and I was just wondering if you came with a good recipe for inoculation.
So on the inoculation that I've historically done was a minimalist. So fresh raw biochar, when used in soil, gets great results. But typically, if you look at years 2 and 3, your results in years 2 and 3 are almost always better than they were in year 1. And at some point it kind of plateaus, right? So your soil is this fertile, and you add biochar, it becomes this fertile, and then in year 2 it becomes this fertile, and year 3 it becomes this fertile, and at some point it kind of plateaus out. At least for the biochar part of it. So what happens between initial application and year 2 or 3? We're not truly sure. There's a bunch of things that go on, but basically the biochar matures. And what we found is that the biochar matures in soil over a few harvests, over a few seasons. But we can cause it to mature very fast, in a few weeks, in a compost environment. So I created a kind of a minimalist approach to causing that reaction to happen, so that I wasn't completely charging it up. So it was still open to accept. You know, it still had ability to bring in more. It still had surface area that wasn't filled up yet, but it was at least charged up, so it wasn't hungry.
It wasn't totally full.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I was charging it, so it wasn't. It was no longer hungry, but it wasn't loaded up to the gills. So what you're asking is you want to load it up to the gills. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Or to kind of how you would know. Kind of what's the rule, what's the measure, you know what I mean? As far as a ratio or a potency. Or
Well, usually your nose can tell you if you're losing nitrogen. And that's the biggest one, is you don't want to waste nitrogen. So if you're adding a bunch of nitrogen, your nose will tell you if you're losing it. And oftentimes you can have ammonia volatilization happening in the interior of the pile, but because the biochar is so absorptive, it can actually capture ammonia in its gaseous state. The ammonia has trouble even leaving the pile. So you might smell it inside, but if you put your nose to the edge, you won't smell anything until you break it open, and then you're like, oh yeah, close that back up, and then just let it chill for a while. But basically, if you can smell the nitrogen, you're losing the nitrogen. That's the easiest way to go about it. But I'm trying to load it. I've usually I've gone minimalist approach, but we have done some experiments where. We did one experiment that was just kind of for fun. We took urea. We took urea and made a slurry with 1 part water, 1 part urea. So full saturated slurry. And we soaked the biochar in that slurry for 24 hours. And then brought the biochar out and put it in a screen and rinsed it with deionized water. And then took that material and had it analyzed. And it was, it came back at 27% nitrogen content. That was after we washed it. So the biochar had pulled up so much nitrogen that it came back at an NPK of 27, it was like 27.11 or 27.01 or something like that. Usually there's a little bit of potassium. I forget exactly what the other ones were. Because I was kind of blown away by the 27. So basically it held a lot of nitrogen. And then we took that material, and it was stable. We'd washed it with deionized water, so it was holding the nitrogen against the flow of water. It was stable, stuck to the surface. And we took that material, and we blended it with the pure sand media, and then did it at 5, 10, 20, and 35% by volume, and then grew corn seeds in that. And I had a grad student in Chico doing this, and she just did the ratios because she's like, yeah, let's just try this. I wouldn't have done 35% because I would have just assumed that at 35% by volume of material that's 27% nitrogen, you're gonna fry anything. That's incredibly.
oh yeah,
It's incredibly. That's like trying to. It's just way too hot. I would have never thought anything would grow. So I was surprised the corn grew. The best was actually at 20%. 10% and 20% did very well, but 30% actually survived. So what that told me was that there is a very high threshold. The biochar has a potentially very high threshold for holding on, for absorbing and holding on to nutrients. Has a very high threshold. The conditions are important because we haven't always found its ability to grab nitrogen to be so high. The reason why it worked with urea is because urea has both positive and negative charged forms of nitrogen. When we look at just soaking up ammonium out of trying to soak up ammonium out of water, trying to suck up just ammonium out of water doesn't always come back with such great results because of the charge. But because the urea is ammonium nitrate, we were able to capture the nitrates, and that's probably what most of what the 27% nitrogen was from the nitrate from that charge of the particle. So in a compost in a mixed bag, like you were talking about with the dulce and the mushroom, it's really hard to say exactly what your limit is, but I think your nose will tell you. And in general, I've usually looked at kind of two ends of the spectrum. I'm usually using a little bit of stuff to make the biochar better, or I'm using some biochar to make my other stuff better. Right, like the compost, like if you put a little bit of biochar with compost, you can improve the composting process. Or you put a little bit of compost with biochar, you can improve the biochar. So I haven't done too many experiments with that, whatever the saturation threshold might be.
What's your best mix? Not to be taking your proprietary blends or nothing.
No, I'll tell you exactly what we do. We use a fish meat and bone meal from Oahu. So there's a facility on Oahu, and years ago I was like, man, I don't know. The first time I told people about it, I'm like, should I really tell them all? Yeah, people need to know. And for years, they still haven't sold out, man, for years. There's a facility on Oahu. There's a facility on Oahu, and it's 70% fish. The other 30% is...
There's no way that stuff is 70% fish.
I know. It sounds
That stuff
crazy.
smells like dead cows.
Well, it's...
There's no way it's 70% fish.
So I've been working with that facility for 6 years, purchasing 8 years now. I first started buying from them 8 years ago. It varies, so there is seasonal difference, and I'm not sure what it is batch per batch because they don't. I mean, they could probably tell you, but that's not usually what we do. But it's on average historically been 70% fish. And depending on the season, depending on the catch, it varies a lot. And it's, like when it's ahi season and they're really going at it. Or I had one load that came in December, and it was before they started sorting. They didn't use to screen everything. It just kind of came and there'd be chunks in there. So occasionally you'd find like a piece of a fish hook or... so I got a load in December one time, and I swear there was turkey bones in it. from like excessive Thanksgiving leftovers or something.
Right.
So it's kind of a mixed bag, but there is no slaughter. There's no slaughterhouse. There's no slaughterhouse on Oahu. So there is meat scrap. There is meat scrap in there that's not just fish, but there's no nervous tissue. There's no central nervous tissue. There's no spinal or brain tissue, because all of that is done in other places. And that's the biggest concern is prions, mad cow disease and other things like that. And those come from central nervous system tissue only. So most of this stuff that's not fish is meat scrap, cuts that don't make the cut, or things that went out of date. But anyways, the stuff is, they take in fish carcasses and meat scrap, and they grind it all up and sterilize it at really high temperature, and grind it up some more, and it's this, and then they in the final stage they dry it all out, and it's this fish meal product that's usually it averages about 971 on NPK, with somewhere like 4 or 5% calcium, and it's an amazing resource. You can buy this stuff at 21 cents a pound. And the shipping can be a bit onerous to try and ship single things over here, but we ship it over by the container load. It's not too bad. And if you were to go down to Garden Exchange and look at the price of fish meal, it's like $1.60 a pound usually. It's really not cheap. And if you look at it, and if you look at the effect of this stuff, of the fish meal versus other fertilizers, even if you were just to compare it on an NPK, it's really, 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 really powerful. Beautiful stuff. So this amazing fertilizer product that's created on Oahu and sold locally is shipped back to the mainland.
Really?
Because not enough people actually buy it here. They ship it back to the mainland for dog food.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because we don't buy it from them. Instead, we like to buy 1616 or maybe dry crumbles. I love that company, by the way. BioChar is awesome. I love their product. Dry crumbles, I've used all their products. They're great. But we have this amazing local resource, and so that's a good case study. Why is all of that not being sold locally? Why are we not fighting for that?
They should
Why are we
sell
not
it in smaller bags.
How much?
They should. I know.
You know what I'm saying?
I've
It's
tried to.
abominable. 1,800 pounds of it.
I know.
And
1,800.
don't get
Talk
it
to
wet.
John about that.
Yeah,
Talk to
don't
John
get it
about that. Those bags, what are those, 2,400? Because they're a mixed bag. They're not all 1 ton bags.
Yeah.
They come at like 2,400. We had one that was 2,600 pounds.
And you drop it on the ground, and what do you do with it?
Yeah, then what
You
do you
don't
do?
want it to get wet.
No, don't let it
Dude,
get
if that
wet.
stuff gets wet, it's like gremlins, man. It's like that stuff gets wet. It's like, don't let it get wet. Like evil comes out. It's like, It stuff turns into maggots, and it's just horrible, disgusting when it gets wet.
Yeah.
But come on, I mean, it's 21 cents a pound plus shipping. It's like nothing. We should be fighting over that. We should be fighting over that. But
It's hard to work with, though. That's the thing
It
about
is.
this stuff. Like, if you broadcast it, it stinks like all
Yep.
hell,
Yep.
and it attracts mongoose to your farm, it attracts pigs to your farm, and it grows weeds like mad if you broadcast it. If you have a side dresser and you can put it on the ground right in the row and bury it, then it works.
Right.
But how many people have a side dresser?
Yeah.
You know, nobody has that equipment in
I
Hawaii.
usually just broadcast very thin. We do really light broadcast, and I've been using that. So okay. So I guess that's a good segue into what I found is a valuable service is that it's not just product, it's service and convenience. So one thing my company does is we take that raw fish meat and bone meal product, and we make a blended product that's a value-added product. That product is 971, and that one is being a little bit generous.
Yeah.
It's typically got about 0 to no potassium. And with that much nitrogen and that much growth that you get a growth explosion with it. With that much, it's nice to have a little bit of potassium to ensure that you have proper cell division. So we bring up the potassium with potassium magnesium sulfate, KMAG. It used to be KMAG, now it's Intrepid Trio. That's a really nice mix because you get the potassium, but you also get the magnesium, which helps balance out the calcium that comes in the bones, as well as the sulfur, which is almost non-existent in that material. So it kind of helps, just that one combination right there helps make the fertilizer more balanced. Then we used to add 20, now we add 30% biochar by volume. We also add a dash of rock powder, harvested locally, because we found that the rock powder in small amounts is really good in the old soils in basically old, tired soils that have been abused and weathered and stuff like that. They tend to respond well to a little bit of fresh something.
You're talking about blue rock.
Blue rock, yeah, just blue rock powder. So we'd add a little dash of that and a little dash of molasses. The molasses helps. At first, we thought the molasses was going to be. At first, I was looking at it as a source of potassium. Potentially, it's got very little potassium. But then as maybe micronutrients. Then I just started playing with it, and I found out the most valuable thing it does is flocculation. It helps the texture. It helps kind of bind things up a little bit better, so the stuff flows. It tosses better, so you have less dust. And one of the other really nice things is instead of being like, wow, this smells like fish and dead cow, it's like, it kind of smells like fish jerky. Because it's got that sweet molassesy kind of thing. It really does. It makes it a lot more appetizing, or not appetizing, or a lot less disgusting. Maybe. It still, if it gets wet, the molasses will do you no good. But at least in its dry form, it helps with it.
Okay.
And the charcoal, the biochar the biochar helps in a lot of ways. The biochar fertilizer combination is it's just a win-win-win-win. Because the biochar helps, especially with organic fertilizers. The biochar is an amazing microbial condominium of sorts. So it helps the microbes break down the large compounds. It helps break down the calcium phosphate, helps them break down the proteins into smaller amino acids, and it really helps to they need to break stuff down, and so having biochar there as a functional service helps that a lot. But then also, the biochar is very absorptive, so as things are being broken down, they have something to stick to. So it helps in the biostimulation, basically the degradation of the fertilizer so it becomes available, but it also helps in holding the fertilizer in your topsoil so it's not lost as it becomes available, or before it becomes available. So the biochar combination is really great in that. And so we take that, we blend it, we take a raw product, we blend it with the biochar, the potassium, the molasses, the rock, make a more complete fertilizer, and we put it in 40-pound bags. And you know what? I mean, all of that fancy stuff we do is great. But for some people, the happiest thing they are is that we put it in a 40-pound bag, and that we can put anywhere between 20 and 50 of them on a pallet, wrap that sucker and send it to them, and they love that. It's a convenience thing,
Yep.
And I don't like that we have to use all that extra plastic, and I haven't been able to find any other way to get around it. For that, to be able to offer that convenience. I think it's still one step better. Feed bags, but feed bags still have the plastic lining, but it's less plastic, but we need the machine that can close it. We don't have that yet. So I just have a $300 heat sealer.
Right.
But that's, it's a really big thing, offering that service. It's a service, convenience. We make a value-added product. And that really, that's a big one, so that we take up, we're one of their favorite clients, because we get about 20 tons every 2 months of that fish meat and bone meal. So they love us. You know, they love that we've been doing that for, you know, it's been growing. We've been doing that for years. I've got a coffee farmer now who's been doing it for 2 years, and that's the only fertilizer he uses in his coffee. Like during right now when they have the awkward weather over there, and everyone just had cherry, and you know they all picked their cherry, and then now comes the flowering, and a lot of people had very few leaves on their trees, and he's got, you know, all through cherry and flowering, he never lost his leaves, and his field stayed green and lush, and he's been having the highest yields ever. And we have to bring in the potassium. What's that?
Who is that?
That's Kona Rainforest. Kona Rainforest Coffee. And so he's the guy that does all the packaging. He does all the, he's got skidsters and tractors and all that stuff. And I used to do all of that in my backyard. But now we do it by shovel, literally. We did, I don't know how many tons of that stuff. We built the grinder. We had to build our own grinder so we built our own grinder for the BioChar, and we use that for the fish too. We did everything by shovel, and so he does that all now with front end loaders and stuff like that. And he does all the packaging over on Kona side now. That's the only fertilizer he's been using on his farm for 2 years, and his production last year was the best ever. His production this year beat his production last year by like something like double or something. So because and it's not just that, he does other things with his farm. He's just a really good farmer in general. But he's a pure organic farm. You know, he's as a 100% organic farmer. He won first place in Kona Coffee 2 or 3 years ago or something, and so we've been making a lot of headway in the coffee industry. So hopefully we'll be able to suck up a lot of that more resource. But I just think that's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Here we have this fish resource that we're shipping it back to the mainland for dog food, and shipping containers of chicken poo over here. It's just, I don't know. It's just one of those funny things. But I mean, I played that too. I mean, I shipped containers of BioChar over here as well. So, all right, that was a lot of other interesting stuff there. Any questions?
How much
John?
you sell?
So, how do they make the magnet shell BioChar? Because they're going to use it for energy. They don't want ash. How do they shut it down, move it on? Can you explain how they make the BioChar?
Yeah.
Or is that part of tough?
No, you want to know? I'll tell you guys how easy it all is. It's so much easier than you'd ever imagine. There's a whole bunch of machines out there, and this is stuff the world needs to know. There's a whole bunch of machines out there that are burning stuff every day. And the particular machine that I'm working with in KL has been in operation for a while now. And all we did was make it run inefficient. In their terms, inefficient is incomplete combustion. So there's a couple ways this can happen. When things are moving through either too fast or too slow, or the temperature, or maybe a screen got a little bit too clogged up. These things can lead to inefficiency in combustion, so that you get incomplete combustion. And their temperatures are generally very high, so for me, that's a problem. So what I did is I worked with them to find out how we can help their machine run less efficient. And I gave them a price on that inefficiency. Because if I didn't give a price for it, they'd have no incentive. So they said, why would we do this? No, we're not going to, why? No, we can't do that. We can't even risk working with you because you come with liability. Selling this stuff comes with liability. We don't want liability. We'd rather just make ash and dump it in a landfill because it's free and there's no liability. But I was able to convince them that they should make BioChar, they can make BioChar, and it's in their best interest to make BioChar by promising and writing a contract to purchase everything that they produce, whether I sell it or not. So I took a risk. And I contracted to purchase everything they produce without ever having seen continual production and without ever knowing if the local market would be accepting or be able to consume 5 times the BioChar I was producing years ago. And so I just went for it. And it's been all right. I mean, we haven't sold, we haven't really sold everything. I've had to give a few truckloads. I work that into my advertising budget, basically. I consider the truckloads that we don't sell immediately go towards advertising, and my advertising is field work. So, Eric Weinert Sr. Is working on a papaya farming demonstration project that's right there by the packing plant. 5 acres just got devoted to a mixture of Jadam natural farming practice and a kind of conglomerate organic and natural farming practice led by a university student. So that there's a 5 acre split into 2, and the BioChar is going across it's crossing both acreage. It's crossing both plots in the back 2.5 acres. And so I haven't sold everything, but it's been going well enough that I'll be all right. You know, it'll work out, I think. And they're happy. You know, they're like, wow, you just increased our revenue stream. Like, and this has benefit to beyond profit.
And they feel good about themselves for it.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I think they're really surprised by, you know, first off, they thought I was crazy. They were just completely dumbfounded by the whole concept. And so now they see that it's cooking, and they're pretty. I think you know, it gives good incentive to maybe step up. You know, move up someday to a larger production capacity. Maybe with another facility or maybe on another island. But the craziest thing is that what I'm doing on the mainland is a parallel to that. I work with a sawmill on the mainland that has a cogeneration biomass to energy machine. That machine is called a cogeneration because they cogenerate heat and energy. They use the heat for curing the wood. They use the heat for curing the wood, and they use the energy for processing, and they sell the excess back to PG&E. That facility was producing 3 80 cubic yard truckloads of a low carbon ash. So 3 times 8, that'd be 240 cubic yards of a low carbon ash every day for the past 15 years.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. And it's still got significant carbon in that ash. It's lower than I'd like it. So I did the same thing. I went in there and I helped them figure out how to run it inefficiently. For them, it was a slightly different process because their machine's much fancier, and we can't just let screens gum up or do funky things like that. There's no duct tape going on here. It was really fancy, and so we actually had to modify. We had to do a modification to their practice that changed what they could do. And now, by flipping a few switches, they can produce it up their total output. So now the output, when they have higher carbon, the volume of ash increases. So now the output there is something like 360 cubic yards of biochar every single day. We can make 360 cubic yards of biochar every single day from one facility, of which I've identified 6 more in California that could potentially be doing the same thing. But none of that is happening if I don't buy a truck. If I don't place an order, they burn it. If I don't place an order, they switch all the knobs this way and they burn the stuff as much as they can. So another way to put it, I've done the math on it, is that something like every 4 hours, from this one facility, every 4 hours that I don't sell it, 10 tons of carbon goes back up in the atmosphere. 10 tons of biochar carbon goes back up in the atmosphere because they burned it. Because I wasn't able to order it yet.
How are you the only guy that's wanting to order that? I mean, California, don't you think there would be even more of a demand?
Well, I'm the guy that makes it available. I'm the guy that's trying, like, so.
Okay.
So I run a business that tries to offer the product. So I'm trying to educate people on how to use it,
Okay,
where
so
to use it.
So it is still.
Oh, well, that's a huge industry for UC Davis.
Because the farmers,
Yeah.
the biomass to energy facility, the way they're set up, they can't handle dealing with that many people and dealing with a whole. They don't work like that.
Yeah.
They need it has to be like there's just too much liability. There's so I'm the liability offset. You know, I handle that. So I make it available to the public
Okay.
by handling that.
That's shoot.
It was it took us 6 months to write. It took us 6 months to write a purchase agreement just to get that approved. And it just got approved. And so that's one facility. Every 4 hours, 10 tons of carbon goes back up to the atmosphere if I don't buy it. And that's because I'm trying to create demand and I've located about, something like a dozen of those in California. And a lot of them are about to shut down indefinitely because the price of energy, their contracts with PG&E are very unfavorable because of fracking. Fracking has lowered the price of energy so much, and it's subsidized, and they're dumping they're ruining the water and stuff like that. And so so there's this huge thing, this huge opportunity that I'm trying to really help kind of make it happen. Yeah. So over there, we're mostly working with vineyards.
Okay.
As a resource to get it into. And then your question.
How much does a 40-pound bag cost of the fish char stuff you're making?
It's 70 cents a pound, so I think that's what, $28 a 40-pound bag. It's
That's a
$1,400.
good price.
Yeah, $1,400 a ton.
Okay.
So it's $1,400 per ton.
What?
700 for a half ton.
Can I buy a ton?
Yeah, totally.
Send me an email really quick.
Just place an order.
But how much area does that cover?
It depends on what you're growing. Like when we went into the coffee orchard, I shared with him what I did with papayas, and then he just took that and did his own thing. What he ended up doing for the coffee orchard was he did like a 1,500 to 2,000 pounds per acre initial application.
Sure.
Boom, get everything going. He's just like he just wanted to get everything going. So he did 1,500 pounds to 200 to 2,000. I think he was. I don't know if it was one or the other or somewhere in between, but something like that. 1,500 to 2,000 per acre. Get everything going, and then now what he does is he does about 500 pounds per acre. So it's about 3/4 pound per tree, and he does that either every 2 months, or depending on weather or flowering. So he does it depending on the stage of growth that the tree is in. So, that's about and sometimes he just does as low as 300 pounds per acre. Doesn't need much, so it's kind of just an upkeep thing. He found that once he got it out there and got things up and going, it just does a little upkeep, 300 to 500 pounds per acre every few months for coffee. For papayas, I was doing 1 to 2 pounds, or actually about 1 to 1.5 pounds per tree every 2 months, and that seems sufficient. I probably could have done more like 2 pounds per tree if I was really pumping them. But I did about 1 to 1.5 pounds per tree every 2 months, and that seemed to work very well.
Cool.
Yeah, and the biochar, we ship that out in a cinder truck, and if we can ship it straight from the facility, it's a lot easier. So if we ship out in a cinder truck, we can deliver it at $100 per cubic yard plus shipping. So up to here, it'd be probably 180 to 200 for delivery, and then 1,600 for the material. 16 cubic yards. It's 18 cubic yard truck, but we always just call it 16 because things settle different. As it's shipping, it can settle a lot. So the biochar is $100 per cubic yard. The application rate on that would typically be about 1 truck per acre, so about 15 cubic yards per acre is a typical application. 2 trucks per acre would be awesome. And that'll usually get you there, especially because oftentimes you want your initial application to be just down the row, with whatever you're planting, rather than just broad acre. And then for getting the biochar just by the pickup truck, you can come to my farm anytime and pick up a truck for $150, $150 per cubic yard. And then if your truck has an odd shaped bed, we'll just measure it with 5-gallon buckets, and it scoops really, really easy. It actually only takes about 15 minutes to load most trucks. And then we can count exactly how much and charge you accordingly. $150 by the pickup, or I can deliver $100 by the dump truck. The fish is $1,400 per ton, 70 cents per pound, plus shipping. We ship out from Kona side. We use Konans, and so usually Conan's, we can get it delivered. Usually what we do is just have it delivered to the docks at Conan's and then have will call. Like John, did that work out okay for you?
Yeah.
The will call, that's worked good, yeah?
So you pick it up at Conan's in Hilo then if you're on
Yeah.
this side?
Yeah.
At the docks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if they're bringing it over from the Kona side, could you just pick it off their truck on the way and
If
save
you got a
yourself some money?
forklift.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have forklift, we'll just deliver right to your farm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's
Or you
easier.
could drag it up with your loader on your tractor and pull it off.
Yeah.
You can put the front.
They're heavy.
the
My
forks.
tractor wouldn't pick it up.
My tractor will pick 1,400.
But if
Yeah, you
we
gotta
if
pick
we're
it up.
doing
How much would that cost?
if we're doing packages, if we're doing the 40-pound bags, we can fill the pallet whatever your order is.
Right.
Anything above a half ton is a wholesale order. So we can do a half ton, 3/4 ton, whatever you want.
Okay.
We can put as many as 50 bags. That's a full ton per pallet. Then wrap the heck out of it and ship it.
Yeah.
And then if your farm is easy enough access, then yeah, it's usually cheaper.
Right.
50, 60 bucks is usually it's not bad.
Wow.
It's not bad. Yeah, that's cheap. Yeah.
Come from Kona? Or drop it off in the-
Yeah, it's really, it depends. I mean, I've seen it because we have to, it depends on how many, like for your order, that was easy because it was 4. So they just came right to us, picked up the 4 and brought them all down to Hilo. So that was easy. Sometimes we have to drop it off, so, but it's always in that basic ballpark.
That works.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about making like a lower nitrogen one? Like lower nitrogen, higher phosphorus?
The only thing we could do is add more biochar. I'm just trying to use local stuff.
Right.
I mean, we could always ship in phosphorus or anything like that, but the final blend comes out about 755, 644, 755. If I had to give it a guaranteed, I'd call it 644, but the average is about 755, and that's with the 30% biochar by volume.
Yeah, there's certain things like any root vegetable, carrots or beets or that sort of thing, you put on like really high nitrogen fertilizers and you grow these enormous tops at the expense of a carrot, or the beet, you know?
Yeah.
Or you have a good sized beet, but the top is just so enormous that like you can't sell it with the top on anymore. Because even though the beet is the right size, the top weighs like 3 times as much as the beet because it's like this.
So what do you grow?
What's that?
What do you grow?
What do I grow?
Yeah.
Carrots, beets, head cabbage, radishes, turnips, green onions,
Jeez.
pak choy.
Green beans.
No,
No more?
Where's your farm?
it's Powilo.
How many acres?
It'll be 16 in a couple months.
Nice.
I mean, technically it's 16, but we're not using all 16 of the acres right now.
Are you able to supply that new Hawai'i store?
No, they don't want my produce.
You know? Too expensive.
Yeah, the Powilo store is like,
They're small.
yeah, and it's like, you know, bentos and
They've got
they might have an random head of iceberg lettuce in
They
there.
don't
you can
have
buy, you know,
anything
sort of
fresh
thing.
in there.
They used to have some of that stuff.
So where does it go? Natural? I am natural.
Yeah, all Island Naturals and adaptations. And,
Oh, yeah.
And the cafe, Sweet King Cafe.
Uh-huh.
That's the majority
That's
of
where
it.
the beets. That's where all the beets and carrots are coming from.
Yeah.
Okay.
Beets, carrots, and cabbage is pretty much. Well, there's one other person that does beets, but carrots and cabbage I think is pretty much exclusively us.
This is my son Noah.
Who's been making
He's
cow all morning. So
yeah. You might have noticed. I don't know if you noticed, but he's been working hard. I was late because we had a lot more cacao than I thought we had, which is always good. We've been processing. He's farmer in training.
Yeah!
I thought that.
Thanks so much, Josiah. That was very
You bet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You bet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. You bet.
Yeah. I don't know.
So support your local farm input provider.
Yeah!
Farmers need discounts? You want to work on that?
Yeah!
Yeah, I should. I should bring something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. And that would be like for all the guys on Maui and Oahu and too, you know, like
Yep.
that would probably give them some extra incentive to start buying your product and getting it shipped over there.
Well, I'll have to take a look at the, I don't know if I can do the fish char, that's what we call the fertilizer. We call the fertilizer fish char. Fish char, yeah, it's called the fish char 755. That one, we don't have so much wiggle room on that because there's so many steps involved. So I can't promise anything right off the bat. You know what? I'll say right here for anyone in this Farmers Union meeting, I can give 10% off BioChar. 10% off BioChar for Farmers Union guys until further notice. Until further notice, you know, I'll see how long I can swing that one, you know. It's part of a community thing, you know. I saw this great study from Harvard where they've been doing that 75 years. They followed a group of people for 75 years, and one of the current director of that study, there's been a bunch. He said he's been going over the data a lot, and one of the most amazing things is that one of the greatest predictors of happiness and success is not your college degree or how much money you earned or how much fame you had. Of course, none of those, right? It was human connection. It was your human connection. It was your family and your friends and your human connection. And that was the greatest predictor of not only happiness but success even. The people that were the happiest and most successful later in life they developed a greater community of sorts. So,
Amen.
10% Farmers Union community bread discount. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. So Pacific BioChar, or Hawai'i BioChar, will lead you right to Pacific BioChar. Pacific BioChar is my website. That's my company, and I have a bunch of cards in the car. I'll go grab those and bring them over and put them on the table here. And Farmers Co-op, Farm Supply Co-op carries our products. You can pick up little bags there. I hope not to take that bucket home with me. I mean, the bucket I want, but
I think
the bucket I want. But anyone that wants a little BioChar, grab at it.
I think our hosts should get that one.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
So the best description that I've heard from anyone that I feel like really describes it is as if you were watching regular television and then all of a sudden you're watching HD. Like things are just a little sharper, a little crisper, a little more vibrant.
Typically, and making decisions and potentially some other work, depending on
After hours, no good at making decisions.
depending on what level of commitment